Did you know there are 7 questions asked to flight attendants who are applying for Delta Airlines that end up eliminating more than 50% of the candidates during the final interview? That's right. In this video, I'm going to tell you what the 7 toughest questions are in Delta Airlines flight attendant selection process, and I'll also explain the correct answers to them. So pay close attention to this video. I'm Romulo Gutierrez. This is the Flydeck Briefing channel. I've been a recruiter for 27 years with experience in international airlines. So let's get started. The 7th question eliminates 18% of the candidates. The question is, what would you do if a coworker wasn't properly following crew procedures? What would you do if you noticed a colleague not following the correct procedures during the flight? This question is very important for Delta Airlines. Delta is well known for its emphasis on teamwork, but especially for its hierarchy and also for flight safety. So, flight safety is the foundation of Delta Airlines. So, if you see, for example, a situation like this and the question is asked, the correct answer would be, first, I would talk to my colleague to try to understand why they are not properly following the safety or work procedures, and based on that, I would correct them, quickly fixing the procedure for the well-being of the entire crew and the safety of all passengers. And of course, once we were back on the ground, I would report the issue I observed to the captain. And I would also tell my colleague that I would need to report that problem, since it's a misconduct issue, for example, a relatively serious one, and that I needed to be loyal both to my captain, to Delta Airlines, and also to my colleague. I need to tell him not only about correcting the procedure, but also that I will need to make a report to the company. This is the answer they're expecting, okay? Although teamwork is a core value at Delta Airlines, it doesn't mean you're going to go around bad-mouthing every colleague who makes a small mistake in their operation. But the question is very clear. If a colleague is not following a procedure that must be followed, procedure at Delta Airlines is one of the most important words. Being observant, a follower, and an enforcer of procedures is one of the foundations for being approved in the Delta Airlines flight attendant selection process. Let's move on to the 6th question now, which eliminates 21% of candidates. The question is, what would you do if a passenger started making demands that go against flight regulations? Here, we've already moved out of the teamwork sphere to dealing with the passenger. It eliminates 21% of the time, okay? So I always work with the answer model that you're going to give. First step, second step, third step. So first step, I would talk to this passenger. I would mention that he is violating some important flight rules, briefly explain what those rules are, and ask for his cooperation. In a second moment, if he insisted on it, I would politely talk to him again, but I wouldn't explain the procedures anymore. On the contrary, I would mention to him the possible penalties he could face if he continued with a certain behavior that violated Delta Airlines rules. And if he still insisted, as a third step, I would speak with the chief flight attendant or the captain so we could take the appropriate legal measures regarding this passenger. So look, Delta Airlines is a company focused on customer experience, excellence in service, respect, and multiculturalism. All of that is true, but the question is very clear. The passenger is disregarding the flight rules. First, you give a warning. Second, you warn about the penalty. And third, respecting the chain of command, you actually seek a stronger measure against this passenger. Let's move on to the 5th question. Before I get to the 5th question, which fails 27% of candidates, while the first one fails 50%, if you want to do a mock interview, a live interview practice online via Google Meet, okay? Where you will be interviewed, I'll give you feedback on whether you did well in the interview. If you didn't do well, if you need to improve, I'll correct your answers. Just reach out on WhatsApp. The number is on the screen. International code 5511977065417. The prices for this service are low for subscribers of the Flydeck Briefing channel. There are new videos here every Wednesday, and I really count on your subscription and your like, because I want to make this project happen. To bring information about all the airlines in the world that I know about, I want to share it here for free on YouTube. And your like and your subscription help me a lot. So I ask you to subscribe and leave your like. Let's move on to the fifth question. The fifth question is, why Delta Airlines? Why do you want to work at Delta Airlines? Well, it's a company that feels and truly is exclusive. It has its own unique characteristics, its own history. It is, if not the largest, then one of the three biggest airlines in the world in terms of flights operated, passengers served, and as a benchmark in flight safety. So they don't want an answer from you where you don't know the company's culture and background. So when you answer why Delta Airlines, I would give a similar answer like this. Look, I chose Delta Airlines for my career, and in fact, this selection process is the best professional opportunity of my life. With that in mind, my choice is based on this. First, Delta Airlines treats safety as a primary factor. Safety comes first. And I want to work for a company where that's the main priority. Second, Delta Airlines manages to combine flight safety with exceptional service. In fact, when you look at the customer reviews online are, well, they're amazing. It's a company that's safe, offers exceptional service, and has a family-like atmosphere where everyone on the team respects and helps each other. I think that's really important for a welcoming work environment. And two very important points. It's one of the most inclusive companies, with minorities and people from all over the world, and it respects all cultures. So I believe that's the reason. That led me, or those reasons led me, to become a candidate for flight attendant at Delta Airlines, okay? So actually, I set out 4 pillars, trying to connect myself to these pillars in a subtle way. Without lying, it has to be true, it has to be spontaneous, to talk about flight safety, exceptional service, teamwork, respect, and inclusion, which are extremely important values for Delta Airlines. Fourth question, rejection. 32% of candidates. If you're still with me at this point in the video, leave a question in the comments so I can answer it, okay? I really count on your comment. The question is, how do you handle criticism from supervisors or team members? In other words, Delta Airlines is only as big and as significant as it is because it's a company that's always seeking improvement. It's always looking for ways to improve. And to improve, they listen to criticism from customers, criticism from authorities. They have to listen to criticism. So they want a flight attendant who listens to criticism. It's important for a flight attendant to listen to criticism. And they're going to ask, how do you handle criticism from supervisors or team members? So the answer is actually pretty easy, but a lot of people slip up. I would say something like, I believe that all criticism comes to add value and to teach. So if I receive criticism from a supervisor or a colleague, I will try to understand that criticism, try to see where I can improve and work on those points so that I can provide even better service. And then you should follow up with an example of when you've done this before, whether at another company or at a different point in your career. For example, when I worked as a receptionist at the Sheraton Hotel in Miami, a supervisor gave me some important feedback. He said that I was often distracted with guests and that I didn't make eye contact. From then on, I started paying more attention to my posture and making sure to look people in the eye. 3 months later, he came back and mentioned how much I had improved, and that made me feel really grateful. So I'm giving this example to show that this is already part of my behavior. All right? Let's move on to the third question. A lot of people fail this one, huh? 39% of candidates in the final interview at Delta Airlines fail on this question, which is, if things don't work out here at Delta Airlines, what will you do? Wrong answer. Oh, I'll apply for the American Airlines process. Oh, I'll apply for the ETH process. Oh, I'll apply for the Qatar Airways process. No. If they ask you what you'll do if it doesn't work out, you should say the following. Look, if I'm not hired this time, I'll try to understand where I went wrong in the selection process and what areas I need to improve, so that in the future I can apply again for this flight attendant position at Delta Airlines, because this is the company I chose to work for. So that's an excellent answer, And a lot of people end up not saying it. Oh, Romulo, but I really would look for another airline to work for. For example, I would go work at British Airways. That's fine, but you have to understand that you're trying to win over the recruiter. So, you can be smarter with your answer. Let's move on to the second question that gets a lot of people rejected. Where do you see yourself in 5 or 10 years? It eliminates 42% of candidates. And in talking with some recruiters from Delta Airlines, they said, look, a lot of people sometimes want to work with us just as a stepping stone to another airline. So the person actually dreams of working for a Middle Eastern airline like Etihad, Qatar, Emirates, or a European airline like Lufthansa. And so they see Delta as the first place to work, to learn the profession, but in reality, they want to fly for Ryanair. And then when I ask them, this is what the recruiter told me. When I ask them where they see themselves in 5 or 10 years, they say, well, in 5 years, I want to have experiences with Middle Eastern airlines. And the recruiter added, so Romulo, of course I reject that candidate. And I agreed. So never, ever, if you have plans in 5 or 10 years to change professions, to not want to be a flight attendant anymore, to switch companies, look, you just don't say it. All right? Don't say it. So if they ask me that, the technically correct answer has 2 points. Point 1, you mentioned that you want to stay with the company, and point 2, bring up some personal aspects as well. So I would say something like, look, in 5 years, I plan to still be working at Delta Airlines, maybe even be a cabin chief for the company, serving passengers in the best way possible, doing the job I love and chose for my life. And I also have personal plans I want to get to know. Some places around the world. I want to visit Rio de Janeiro, where Romulo lives. Where Romulo lives, I want to build a new house for my family. Try to show that you have personal dreams that you share with other people. The psychologist also pays a lot of attention to this in the interview. And the question that fails 50% of the candidates, maybe it's the easiest question, but at the same time the trickiest one. It's a tricky question. It's the first question of the interview. They're going to ask you to give a pitch, a personal introduction, talk a little about yourself. And many candidates have a script that's too long or a script that doesn't fit with Delta Airlines culture. And I left a complete script for you to answer. Tell me about yourself right here. Go check it out. It'll really help you. Great preparation. Take care and see you next time. Bye. Bye.